Okay, here we are today. It's again on January 7th. We were in Spirit Lake today. We did with Mike Majeur in his first shed, and then we went out on the lake, on the backwaters of Spirit Lake, and we did the muskrat trapping. And now we're in Dave Plueger's first shed, and Dave is obviously he's going to do raccoon today, and some different tricks, some new tricks, but. Dave, we're here in Monticello, Iowa, right?
Yep.
So tell us about yourself, Dave, and take it away.
This is my 40th year river trapping for coon. I take 95% of my coon on the river out of a boat. I use primarily footholds, a few dog proofs, no snares, no conibears. The first thing that I do when I get a raccoon out of the trap is I wash it on site. Just to get any of the excess mud out or anything. I do tumble my coon anyway later, but it just helps keep the coon cleaner as I go. I just use a cement mixer as a tumbler. It can do 4 at a time. After those first 4 are done, as I skin the next 4, those 4 are done by the time I get the next 4 done. So I just will keep rotating as I go.
And we're going to show them that and give an idea how long you keep in the tumbler and things like that.
Yep.
Okay.
I make my opening cuts right below the elbow. That way I don't have to do any trimming after it's on the stretcher. And I make a straight cut from one heel to the other. Right on up like that. Then I go around the anus. Just like that. I use a small channel lock pliers. My wrists aren't as strong as they used to be. I start on the inside with them, and it really helps pull that fur down. It's a lot quicker. I make just a couple light cuts next to the tail, and I take a regular sharpening steel, ram that through and pull. I've got over halfway down the tail now. I split it just a little bit more, cut it on it just a little. I've had this same tail stripper since the early 80s. Can't believe I haven't lost it in all these years, but it works very well. And you can pull that tailbone right out. It's easier to pull the tailbone out than to pull the tail off of the bone. As you can see, I grabbed it and pulled the tailbone out rather than just yank on it.
Good.
And I skin all my coon on a machine. I still make just a small little cut here on the belly side. I've had problems in the past not doing that and having the belly rip open on me on the machine. Now I take it from here. Typically, I'll open all these raccoon first and lay them out next to my machine and then winch them all off. I lay all my raccoon belly up. Digestive juices can be an issue if you have a coon laying around for 2 or 3 days. If you have that coon laying belly down, those digestive juices can cause a green belly to happen faster. So I never let a raccoon hit concrete. Concrete can sweat and put moisture into the leather, which is something we don't want to have happen. All my coon always are elevated off the surface of where I'm at.
Notice he's got the pallets there, just something you can pick, anybody can pick those up.
Yep. I get mine free in town here at a couple manufacturing places, so it helps just to keep that coon from tainting. The cooler we can keep them, the better. I try to keep the coon cool at all times. It's important. Next I go to this skinning machine that I made myself many years ago. It's just a winch from Harbor Freight. I use cables to hold my coon. That way, just in case I would cut a tendon, I don't have to worry about not being able to put it on my skinning machine. And these are just a couple of fabrication vice grips. Clamp the fur in. I still run a push button.
Okay. Well, just notice the how much is being gripped here by these vice grips that he's fabricated here. So he's got about 5 square inches on each side.
And I should show on the inside of this vice grips, there's 2 pieces of rebar offset with one more that goes into the middle, which helps hold the fur. It doesn't hurt the leather any. And I don't have these set super tight at all, just enough to hold that pelt.
Okay. And Dave, when did you catch this coon?
This coon was caught yesterday.
This coon was caught yesterday.
Yep.
It was laying here in your cold room here.
Yep.
Okay. Okay.
This point, I just push my fingers through and pull that front leg out.
Okay, the height of his ceiling here, we're talking about his winch, is it about?
The winch itself, the pulley wheel goes all the way to the top peak rafter.
Okay.
So I can do coyotes on this.
Okay.
I can do any size fur bearer in Iowa I can do on this. So.
Okay, okay.
Okay, here's the ears. I cut the ear holes big enough that I can get my finger in. That helps you pull on it. Here's an eye, another eye. Now I get rid of the bottom lip now, so I don't have to do it later on the stretcher because it will just flap over and you don't want it on a stretched coon because it could rot underneath that. So that's where I get rid of the bottom lip. This coon is fairly clean, but I noticed it still had a little bit of dirt in it, so I'm going to take it to the tumbler. I use sawdust that I get here in town. I'll put 4 in at a time, and while I'm skinning the next 4, it's usually time enough for this 4 to be done. I just keep it takes probably 15 minutes with 4 in there to be done. From there they go onto that pallet. From there they go to the freezer. I quick freeze all my coon. I hang them on nails, 16-pay nails that have had the head of the nail cut off so they pull off easy. The quicker I can get that raccoon frozen, the better. I don't typically have time to scrape a raccoon while I'm still trapping. That's why I freeze them temporarily till I have time to scrape them later. Then they just get piled up. Some people want to freeze in a chest freezer, just fold the head under and the tail under, freeze them like that. I found it not to be really necessary because I get to them and scrape them fairly quick.
Yes.
So,
Okay, that's I mean, if you basically, Dave, is what we're saying. If you have a walk-in freezer, you're freezing them the best way.
Yeah.
And he's got a walk-in freezer where you actually can freeze them. That's the very best way. That's the way that we do it. But if you just have a chest freezer, you fold them over like we showed it. Okay?
yeah, hanging them like that, I can have one completely froze within an hour. I'll go in there, tap on them, and they're already pretty froze. So. Now I'll get into scraping the coon here. My beam is on a hinge, so it's up all the way when I'm not using it. I bought this beam probably 30 years ago from Ludi Shada. It's been a real good beam for me. I use a Necker 600 knife, and it really takes a nice swath. You can see I'm not taking just a small little width of an area with this beam. I'm taking a fairly wide width of an area with this type of beam.
So in other words, he can take a wider width off of the coon just because the flatness of the board is not rounded so much where he's not taking off so much.
Exactly.
And there's no padding on this at all? This is just, you scrape right on the board
I scrape
right here?
on the board, yep.
Okay.
That's important, and I'll show that when I scrape not to use too much pressure without having a pad because you can end up with hair follicles starting to come through, especially on younger coon, 1Xs and 2Xs, not so much an older, bigger coon. This is a Necker 600. I keep one side super sharp and the concave side is dull. To sharpen it, I either use the back side of another knife, and you'll have to find a knife that you can feel it actually doing something, or I use a steel in the same manner. Just to keep that sharp side sharp. I wear a glove on my right hand. For some reason, if I don't, I end up ripping my glove on this right hand. I don't know why.
Because you use more pressure there.
I think that's why, because I do
Sure.
use more pressure. Before I do put it on the stretcher, I feel through just to make sure there aren't any cockle burrs or chunks of dirt that might cause me to cut the leather as I scrape. I do snap to make sure I've got most of the sawdust out from the tumbler. And I just wear an old shirt when I scrape it. I'm not going to right now. I don't wear a bib or anything like that. I use a piece of old neoprene wader just to cushion my belly a little bit. Now I'm going to start on the side of this coon. There's a chunk of meat and gristle here right on the cheek and behind the ear that you want to get. And this is just a slight angle I'm using here. Probably maybe a 15 to 20 degree angle. Now I've gotten that gristle gone. I'll go down to right next to the leg like that, and then I'll flip it over to the dull side. I know at this point I can...
Because you're through the hardest part
through
there.
the hardest part there.
The dull part now will take the fat away.
Yep. Now I'm down over the front leg. Then I just flip the front leg over the end of the beam so that I can get this fat that's right under the armpit. Now this is a female. She didn't have cubs, I don't believe, so her nipples aren't protruding. If it was an older sow that had raised a litter this year, you have to be pretty careful not to catch them with your knife and put a big hole in it. Actually, no, this is a boar. I thought it was a female. It's a boar. I always go back up to the top several times just to make sure I didn't miss anything up there. The more fat, the better, it seems. I've trapped down in Mississippi, and the first time I trapped down there, I thought, wow, these smaller coon are going to be easy to scrape. Well, they're not. They have a red membrane that's really hard to get off, whereas our heavier, fattier Iowa coon are a lot easier.
Okay, he's got a bucket there that you just kind of keep your area clean.
Now before I slide it down to the other side, I use a piece of burlap just to keep my beam clean so I don't get a bunch of fat all over the fur.
Okay.
Now I flip it to the other side. Here's that meat and fat and gristle again behind the ear. This ear hole's a little big. Now I can flip it to the dull side again.
Okay. How did you know when to flip it from the sharp side to the dull side? Like what?
You can kind of feel when it's starting to go easier.
Okay.
And then I flip it over, yeah.
Okay.
This is probably a 3X boar. His neck and shoulder area isn't going to be too bad. I should have grabbed a little bigger coon.
Okay, you see him working the flank. Tell us about working the flank there, not to rip it or where not to put pressure.
I just go straight off. Don't go at an angle here at all so you don't rip the edge.
Okay.
I just go straight off with, a fair amount of pressure, but not, overkill.
Okay.
I don't scrape this little area here because I'm going to cut that out with the window. Now I'll wipe my beam again. Now all I've got left is a strip down the back.
Could we call that the hardest part, Dave, to scrape or?
Right up through here is probably the hardest area, especially on a bigger 4X or 5X boar.
Okay.
I start right up here behind the head here and the ears.
Tell
with the sharp side of my
tell
knife.
us how a beginner could actually learn how to get that feel for that, or what he should do, or how he should start.
I'm going to say with a beginner, first figure out what part of your knife feels the sharpest. I know the sharpest part of my knife is right in here. Right in the center is not quite as sharp. And it's all a feel of what angle to use and how much pressure, and just watching what happens. See, I can see that meat starting to slice off, but I'm not actually cutting into the leather. And by this point, I can switch to the dull side because I can see it's starting to peel pretty good.
Right, I think we can all see that there. Good.
He's got a little bit of scar tissue here, but not much. Some boars are way worse than that.
What do you mean by the scar tissue there, Dave?
During breeding season, when this coon would be mounting a sow that's in heat, other boars will try and grab the tail or behind the neck or back of that coon to pull him off so that he can try and breed with her. And that's how they get a lot of gristly, bigger, older boars get a lot of gristly scars on their neck. And that's why you'll have older boars, sometimes their tails all broke or kinked up.
Yeah.
Or even gone, completely gone. And that's due to breeding other boars trying to get to that sow. And see, again, I'm going way up towards the top, so I didn't miss anything up there. But not too much pressure that you're seeing hair follicles. So
You see absolutely no hair follicles there, Dave.
down here,
talk about the tail. Talk about the
Yeah, I
tail.
was
A
just gonna say
lot
that-
of people have tails that aren't straight properly.
the tail can be tough sometimes. Go up the sides here a little bit first to get that. Now I have to finish splitting the tail all the way down. I use a sharp port a little bit if I have to here, just get that rolling.
Good.
And just go down the tail, a couple good swipes with the dull side. Some of that will dry up. That's pretty good right there.
Yeah.
I'm gonna look at my notes just to make sure I'm not forgetting. Okay, I got everything covered pretty well there.
Okay.
Now I go on to the form. I'd rather call this a form rather than a stretcher because you're not actually stretching the animal.
Good word.
This was probably maybe a 3X coon running around the wild. It's going to be 3X coon when it's on my stretcher, and it's going to be a 3X coon when it comes back from the dresser. That's important. I hear a lot of guys tell me, Dave, you're losing size by not using wood. And if you're gaining a size, wood versus wire, you're overstretching. It's as simple as that. There's nothing wrong with using wood if you don't overstretch.
You stretch the belly first.
Yep, I go to the belly side first. This is just the hind legs here.
Show them how the hook is hooked, or what side of the hollow part of the hook is there.
Yep, the hollow part
That's
so
the
the
air
air can
inside.
get in there.
Right.
I go to the very first hook, then I go to the outside hook.
And that goes on the
usually
third
centers
one.
it
That goes
pretty
on the
well.
third one.
Well,
Okay.
this one it's not kind of. I'm going to go to the next one because it wasn't quite centered. That's
Okay.
important to get that coon centered. I make sure it's centered the whole way.
Centered meaning what?
The pelt centered on the
The pelt is
form.
centered. The legs are on the right side.
Yep, I've seen some guys who
distance
have
apart.
it, like this.
Too far to the
That's
side.
just too far.
Yeah.
Just make sure it's centered. It's centered there. Now I go to the back. I go quite a ways down the tail. It just helps hold it open as it dries and helps it dry quicker. I don't pin the tail open or anything like that. I've never found it to be necessary. Now I hang the coon up and I cut the window out. And it's important not to get too wide into your window and get into the flanks, because that's good usable fur. This is on the inside of that back leg cut. Up about where the penis would be, maybe a little higher, and back down. Don't ever try and cut a window after the raccoon is dried. It's going to create a very sharp edge, and you're going to have a very upset grader because it can actually cut your hands. You have to cut that while it's still wet.
So you made no cuts on the front legs then? That cut
Nope.
was made
That
when you
was-
skinned the coon? It made it
yeah.
a lot easier to pull out the legs on the coon?
Yep.
Is where you cut it out
Only
in
thing I
the
might
opening
do is
process.
just trim this little flap here just a little. There we go.
Okay.
But yeah, otherwise I try to do as much as I can during the skinning process so I don't have to do hardly anything after the stretching process. And I do use clothespins just to keep the skirt even. Don't know if it's necessary really, but I want both sides to be pretty much the same.
Right.
And that's pretty darn good right there. And then it goes into my drying room. Oh, I do brush this window prior to putting on the form, and then I snap it good just to so that this window area sticks out real nice. The fur does and looks much better to the grader. This drying room I keep at roughly 55 degrees and a lot of good air movement.
Yeah, it
And-
feels good in here. I mean, really fresh air.
Yeah, and typically within 4 to 5 days, I can take a coon off. The way I tell is if the tail is stiff, when I tap it, then I can pretty much assure that the rest is dry. I don't see one here now. I just took some off earlier. There's one that's fairly stiff. You can see how it doesn't. Oh, it's fairly stiff when I hit it. It bounces right back. That one could have probably be ready to come off.
So Dave, I see a little like fleshy this here. Tell us about that and when it's ready, or maybe it's not ready.
That's not ready yet, and it will dry down. That will eventually melt away and dry down.
Okay.
I could have probably hit that one a little bit better.
Okay.
But that's my rule of thumb is I tap the tail to see, if it's hard, then the rest of it's usually pretty well ready to go.
Tell us about these coon down here. These are
These were taken out of the freezer to scrape. Usually overnight, they're ready to go. Some of these are ready to go today yet. I'll scrape these tonight yet. I took 5 out a little while ago to thaw. They'll be ready tomorrow morning. I'll probably take some more out yet tonight.
Tell us about your daily schedule then, like just working a trap line.
Well, I usually on the river at sunrise. I run.
When you say canoe, we have a canoe out there.
Yeah.
You have a motor on it, or
Yeah, I run a trolling motor on it. It really moves pretty well with the trolling motor. I have a flat bottom too that I use whenever I can, but the last river line I was on, there wasn't an access to get my flat bottom in the river, so I had to use a canoe. I prefer the flat bottom because it's a lot more stable than the canoe, but the canoe does go faster. As for weight capacity, I can hold pretty much the same number of coon in my flat bottom, which is a 14-footer, as I can in my 17-foot canoe. I've had 32 coon in the canoe this year. It was riding low, but it held them. So otherwise, I have pickup points where my wife will come and get the coon out of the boat if I have too much weight, and then I can keep going with. And then sometimes she'll bring me new fresh trolling motor batteries, Deep Cycle Marine batteries. I
so
keep
one
going.
day you may go through a.
My first line is my longest line. I have 2 pickup points on that where I'll stash raccoons or have the wife come and get them. Usually I just stash them anymore just to save on fuel expense with the truck, so she doesn't have to go get the coon,
Right.
come home, and then go meet me in another place and come home.
Okay. Gotcha.
So I just have stash places. I cover them up good with grass and no one can see them. I've never had a problem with anyone ever finding them, so knock on wood.
Okay.
But that's my day. I come home, I skin as many as I can. Like first week of the season when I'm catching 60, 70 coon a night, I may not get them all skinned that night. Then I lay them outside on pallets so they're not inside in the heat, belly up again, and get them skinned the next day. I'm usually only a day behind though for the first week of season, then I'm able to keep caught up after that. So, I used to have my nephew and my daughter skin for me, but they're grown up and gone now. So that was really nice. I pay them $1 a piece, but.
Tell us about your motivation or your passion or what you enjoy about it.
The river I don't have any competition. Very seldom do I. I don't see anyone. I see a lot of wildlife. Running a trolling motor, I'm not making a lot of noise. So I see deer, turkey. I've seen bobcat, otter, coyotes. It's a really enjoyable way to trap. There's a lot of coon. My catch per trap ratio is much higher running a river line than when I used to run a road line. It's not uncommon at all for a lot of days to be 50% catch. If I have 100 traps set, I expect 50 coon. Whereas on a road line, if I've got 100 traps set, I may only catch 30 to 40 coon, which it's just because I'm able to hit the hottest locations on the river where I know coon are going to frequent every night. Whereas bridge trapping, that raccoon may not go under that bridge at night.
Right.
You don't know. So it's just a more profitable way, I think, for me. My gas expenditure is extremely low because I'm 2 miles from the river. My furthest I drive at all would be about a 30-mile round trip, and that's Hopkins to here. So it's just, my overhead is lower that way. My expense to catch each raccoon is way lower that way. I use floating catfish pond food for bait, and I add in used fish fry oil that I get from a fish fry they have every spring here up with coon hunters, and that just works excellent. It smells like a fresh fish fry, and coon just can't resist it.
They love it.
They love it. They love it.
Is there anything you want to tell like younger guys getting into it, do's or don'ts, or what to enjoy?
Don't get discouraged. There are some nights when raccoon just don't move, and especially here 2 nights ago, we had a very warm night. This time of year, the raccoon has their layer of fat for winter, and a really warm night would be, say, us wearing a fur coat in July when it's 80 degrees. We don't feel like moving around very much.
Okay, good.
A colder night, 2 nights ago when the wind was blowing and it got colder, the raccoon were moving heavily. Now, this time of year, breeding season's starting to kick in, the rut's starting to kick in. The big male boars are going to be out regardless now of the weather, really. But that's a downside in a way too. If you're using bait, they're typically not as interested in bait this time of year because they have love on their mind. So they're feeding off the fat reserves in their body, and they're just looking for females in their territory. So it's a little tougher to draw a big boar in during the rut. I like to use a smorgasbord of smells then, and I found that for some reason the big boars are really attracted to bobcat urine. I don't know what it is. I know I used to raise pet raccoons, and our farm cats and the coons never got along well at all. It's like they're mortal enemies. So I mix that in with my bait at that time, or use it as just a trailing scent on its own to my set. But I don't think you can use too many smells on a raccoon. You want to really, it'd be like, let's say you're eating sweet corn every day for a month, and somebody throws a T-bone in front of you. You're probably going to put that sweet corn off to the side and go for that T-bone. Well,
Right.
a raccoon's no different. He's been feeding on something the whole time. If you throw something different at him, it may be enough to pique their interest and make them work your set. As for fur handling when you're getting started, just take your time. Don't get in a hurry. There's a lot of YouTube videos out there that will really help you. I didn't have such luxuries when I was growing up. I grew up in the fur boom of the 70s, where every trapper in the area was super tight-lipped. They weren't willing to help a young guy at all because they considered me future competition. So I had to really learn a lot through trial and error, and I did get frustrated at first. It took me 4 years of trapping before I finally caught my first raccoon at 14 years old.
4 years.
Yeah.
Well, did you catch
coon
muskrats,
I caught a lot of muskrats back then, but we
Yeah.
had a lot of muskrats
Yeah.
back then. But we did not have near as many raccoon during that era, and probably just because the price was so high.
Right.
But I didn't give up, and you got to have a drive to want to keep going at it. And it's a great way to spend your time in the fall and winter. I work seasonally in town here, and I'm able to be laid off before trapping starts, which works great for me. So I can trap all winter long, and then go back to my job here in probably April. I'll be back at my seasonal job. So if you can find someone to help you out, though, you can shorten your learning curve a lot. I know once I finally started going to trapping conventions and attending some demos, I shortened my learning curve, especially on canines, a lot. I was not a coyote trapper, and I learned some things that way. But in today's world of technology there is, it's very easy to get any information you want on how to do certain things, like you guys are doing with
Yeah,
these.
yeah. That's the purpose of these. Dave has a passion for other trappers to learn this. You can see by just the way he's talking. Yeah, that's our goal. We want people to understand the methods. We want people to understand how to do things the proper way. You can develop your own methods, and that's why we have Dave here today. I mean, he's learned a lot on his own. So, anything else you want to tell us before we?
Well, as I said, I was self-taught pretty much, and I'm sure there's faster ways to do things. This is just the way I do things. If you can pick up tips or tricks from other people that do things faster, by all means try them. I do. I learn all the time. If you're not learning, you're not trying, I always say. So nobody knows everything. Nobody knows everything. About the time I think I have raccoon figured out, they'll throw a curveball at me that I didn't think would happen. So
we have a question on here. It says DPs or CS?
coil springs. 1.5 coil springs. I do use some dog proofs early on when the coon are still building fat reserves, but I found that later in the season I get a lot of avoidances with dog proof traps for whatever reason. I don't know if it's the feel of the steel, putting their hand in or what. I do run rubber triggers on the triggers of my dog proofs, and that helps somewhat. But I found where I've had dog proofs dead center on a good hot trail coming to the river. I've got my pocket set in the river with my coil spring. Dog proofs on that trail leading there, same bait and everything. They avoided the dog proofs, but got caught at the pocket set. Now, I don't know if they're just investigating the hole and happen to step on the trap, because they don't have to be as committed using a coil spring trap like that as they do with a dog proof trap. They actually have to start eating the food and reach in and pull that trigger. Whereas a pocket set where I dig a hole in deeper than the raccoon can reach to start with, he may not want to eat the food, but he smells something and he walks down there and happens to get caught. So it's, your chances, I think, are increased later season with foothold traps versus dog proof traps.
Oh, great point. So this is the B&G show with Dave Plueger. If you have any questions, you can talk to. You can send us a question. We'll send it directly to Dave. Dave can answer it. And the other thing is, you can like us on Facebook. Go to Instagram. Go to YouTube. And we just want you to continue following us, because we want you to enjoy your experience as a trapper. Right, Dave?
Exactly. Absolutely. Yep. That's the main thing. Have fun with it. I know when I used to trap super hard when I was younger, it started to become a drag, and that's one thing I never wanted to have happen, was that it became a job. It's a job, it's a lot of work, but if it starts to become not that, then you need to do something different, because it's all about enjoying what you're doing. So
Okay.
my mom always said, find something you love to do and you'll never work a day in your life. So
Great. Well, thank you, Dave.
Yes.
Thanks for
You
being
betcha.
with us today.
Yes,
That
thank
was
you.
great.
Thank you.